myself, ecologist, and John, who identifies as a hole digger. We were invited to, we've been invited to come and talk to you a little bit about how we've worked together over the years, blending research and practice for a nature positive future. Hopefully the technology is going to hold up, but it is very slow, so bear with me if I'm struggling a bit. Yeah, so we're essentially talking about how we renature landscapes and how we've worked together to do this as an academic, as a practitioner. And we decided not to do a double act today. I'm going first, talking a bit about the science, and then John's going afterwards. But in reality, I think it's been an iterative process. We spend lots of time chatting together, throwing ideas at each other. Sometimes the research leads and the practice follows, but quite often the practice leads and the research follows behind. But it's very much been an iterative collaboration. And I just want to give a mention to two PhD students, Caroline Nash and James McGill, who kind of worked in the middle between both of us. And a lot of the work I'm presenting today has been related to the work that they've done. And hopefully some of the themes that come out of our presentations will link to themes that have been discussed already today. As was opening this morning, we're in a global biodiversity crisis. There's numerous anthropogenic impacts driving declines in biodiversity. To the extent that the Living Planet report has reported that on average, a 69% decline in wildlife populations around the world between 1970 and 2018, unprecedented declines in human history. And it's not just the tropics, biodiversity hotspots in the tropics that are facing these declines. It's also in the countries that we represent. So I do a lot of research in the UK. We have this belief that the UK is a green and pleasant land, but recently we've discovered that it's one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. Ireland, this report reported that 1 in 5 species in Ireland are threatened with extinction. But we are at a very positive moment in our history. As is now being termed the Roisin curve, the global community came together in COP15 to make a commitment to move to change the direction of this curve from one of a net loss of biodiversity to no net loss, and then eventually a full recovery of biodiversity. And we know a lot of the ways to do this. So conservation and ecological network theory has taught us lots of lessons in terms of how to change this curve, how to move us back into a nature positive future. So we know we need to recreate landscapes where nature can thrive. We know we need to conserve and protect the best sites in our landscape where the majority of our biodiversity can be found. We need to find opportunities to improve these sites, to create them more permeable, better for biodiversity, increase their area, either by increasing the area of these protected reserves or creating buffer areas around them to increase the resilience of these systems, and by connectivity, reconnecting these sites, either physically or through stepping stones, so our landscapes become more permeable for wildlife to move across them. And obviously, a key part of this is restoring our rural habitats. So restoring the hydrology in our peat bogs, restoring these natural landscapes where nature has thrived for so long. But it's also really critically important that we restore nature in our urban areas as well, that we reconnect our communities. We've heard a lot of presentations today about the positive impacts you can have on urban communities, but reconnecting our urban communities and ensuring that they get the benefits from having nature on their doorsteps, the ecosystem services that nature can provide. And nature-based solutions have emerged as a mechanism for restoring nature, both in our rural landscapes and in our urban landscapes. So this idea of using nature as a solution to societal challenges. Nature-based solutions represent an effective mechanism for balancing trade-offs of competing demands in urban areas, a mechanism to engage residents, to increase awareness, to increase ownership over their spaces, a mechanism for delivering multiple benefits for nature and benefits for people, and delivering cost-effective solutions to multiple challenges. So nature-based solutions come in all shapes and sizes. So from the small, this idea of introducing parklets and pocket parks to create social spaces on our streets, areas that often suffer from antisocial behaviour. Larger scale interventions like this biosolar green roof, converting hard roof surfaces that are otherwise impermeable and cause stormwater issues to revegetated systems that not only manage stormwater but support biodiversity. And then these larger scale nature-based solutions, restoring wetlands in urban areas as places that people can visit, but also places for managing stormwater and providing clean water, restoring urban forests, and looking at neglected areas and looking at opportunities for creating assets for local communities and biodiversity restoration. But, and this is a big but, the word greenwashing has been mentioned today. Quite often when these schemes are installed in urban areas, there's missed opportunities because there isn't thorough and detailed thinking about the benefits that can be achieved through these spaces, particularly the benefits for nature. So quite often nature is considered an assumed benefit of putting something green in place, but isn't really considered in detail in the integrated thought process. And this can often lead to greenwashing when we're installing green spaces back into urban areas. And in fact, if you look at the definition of nature-based solutions, if your nature-based solutions aren't improving the health, abundance, diversity, and resilience of species, populations, and ecosystems, by definition, they're not real nature-based solutions. So we look at this space and maybe have the same problem as you. Hopefully no one was involved in this space. So is this a nature-based solution? Well, there's a possibility. If the site was a tarmac space previously with no nature on it, then yeah, we've probably brought some more nature into this space. It could have been co-produced. It's probably unlikely, but there's a possibility, and it does have some value for nature. But when we look at it really, look at it through my view as an ecologist, this represents a missed opportunity. There's a lack of structural complexity. There's a lack of wild flowers for pollinators, and there's a real lack of opportunity. This kind of copy and paste approach to landscaping really isn't what nature provides. So you've heard this mentioned quite a lot today. I worked on the Connecting Nature project, and on the Connecting Nature project, we developed a framework for supporting people in mainstreaming nature-based solutions. So this comprised a series of elements, things like governance, co-production, financing, and I particularly worked on the element in relation to technical solutions. So in this element, we explored the technical challenges in relation to implementing and scaling nature-based solutions. So asking questions like, what's the best solution for the area? What local challenges can we support through technical design on the site? And we worked with a number of local authorities across Europe to look at what questions we need to be asking when we're designing technical solutions for nature-based solutions. And one of the key questions is this idea of how can we design to benefit people, but also ensure that we're designing to benefit nature? And one of the fundamental components of this is developing a clear understanding of the local landscape context and the local ecosystem that service needs, and using this knowledge of local needs and local context to embed multiple functions into planning, delivery, and stewardship of nature-based solutions. And the way we did this is a concept that we termed eco-mimicry. I think, oh, I'm gonna have to speed up a lot. We termed eco-mimicry. So this idea, eco-mimicry is similar to biomimicry, but it looks at locally contextualized sustainable design. So what we were doing, going back to talks earlier this morning, is this idea of how do we learn from nature? How can we read the natural landscape like a book and use this in how we design green spaces? So we looked at the most biodiverse sites in our urban landscapes, and we took inspiration from these and fed these into the design of urban landscaping. And I just want to quickly present 4 case studies around the research that we've been doing about embedding eco-mimicry into what we do.
You're okay, actually. There's no minister coming after you. So in theory, you probably should leave marks and closing remarks at 4 o'clock. If you want to keep talking for the next 50 minutes, as you can, and that will avoid any questions.
Careful what you ask for, because I could probably do that on my own. I know John could. So the first one is a project at Barking Riverside. So Barking Riverside was a large post-industrial brownfield site in East London, which pre-development, it's been turned into a large housing development. And pre-development, it had probably national importance for biodiversity. And so one of the targets of the development was to retain the nature within the development. So we were looking at how we could work with the landscape architects on site to ensure that this could happen during the development. And so what we wanted to do was to understand why post-industrial sites, like this picture here, are so good for biodiversity and the kind of biodiversity that you're found on those sites. So we used ecological surveys from housing developments, and we fed them into a thing called Pantheon, which is an invertebrate assemblage analysis tool. And this created this graph you can see just behind me, which is the habitat associations of the invertebrates that are found on the site. So the most important and the largest component was flower-rich resource. So the kind of thing that is quite simple to recreate in urban landscaping design, flowers for pollinators, wildflower areas. But there are also a lot of other habitats that are typically not associated with urban landscaping. So we wanted to look at whether we could start to incorporate these into urban landscaping and enhance the biodiversity. So we took inspiration from this and embedded it into the urban landscaping. Things like standing dead wood, rubble, metal sheeting, typical features you'd find on brownfield sites. We also dug out sections and backfilled them with sand, concrete features for basking areas, and then blended this idea of shortcut amenity grass, ornamental planting, and then wildflower areas. Then we monitored the areas to see what impact this was having and compared it to neighboring areas with more traditional urban landscape design. And we found that the average species richness of spiders, beetles, bees and wasps, particularly conservation priority species, was significantly higher on the landscaping that had been created. There were more than double the number of conservation priority species recorded, including 5 red data book species, and bumblebee species richness and abundance was significantly higher on the new landscaping we'd created. We also started to look at roof level. Thanks to John's support, we developed the concept of an ephemeral wetland roof. So this idea that typically green roofs are very dry habitats, but the picture in the top left is a picture from the brownfield site that shows ephemeral wet areas that are quite common and important habitat features on brownfield sites. So we recreated these at roof level. We used a blend of different aggregates, we used a blend of different depths, and we altered the hydrology so that standing water was held on the roofs for short periods of time. And then we surveyed the roofs to find out what impact we were having. And we found that in terms of vegetation, there are significant differences in plant development on the 2 substrates, on the different depths of substrates, and overall, the hydrology and the blend of substrates was creating a mosaic effect on the roofs. We did invertebrate surveys, and we recorded 2 red data book species, 7 nationally scarce species, 22 locally important species, including species associated with wetland habitats that aren't typically found on green roofs. We also recorded this very beautiful bumblebee, which is a UK Biodiversity Action Plan species. And 40% of the invertebrates we found were conservation priority species. And it was the same pattern for birds. So a subset of the birds using the brownfield, we found also using our ephemeral wetland roofs. I'll go through the other ones quickly. So we looked at this roof as well. So this is what's termed a biosolar roof. So blending photovoltaic panels with a green roof system. Again, this was designed using eco-mimicry principles, so different substrates, different depths, habitat piles, and then there was a variation in the density of PV panels. We surveyed the roof again, and we discovered that all of these features were adding to the habitat complexity of the roof. So plants varied in relation to PV panels. It seemed that there was moisture developing at the base of the PV panels, and this was creating areas of more vigorous vegetation growth and areas where there was shading, there was less vegetation growth. And it was the same for the invertebrates. So different species and different groups of species were associated with different habitat features on the reef. The third case study is IKEA green roof shelters. I don't know if you're introducing your green roof shelters, but it's an innovation that John developed, creating eco-mimicry brownfield-inspired habitat on the top of bicycle shelters. So several of these were installed outside of an IKEA in North Greenwich in London. We monitored them for John, and we found a whole diversity of biodiversity using these roofs. If you put a standard bike shelter in, you wouldn't have been getting any of this. So 50 different species of plant, 6 conservation priority species, 15 different species of bee using these systems. And then the last case study, it looked at introducing sand piles into rank grassland areas. So this idea that in a rank grassland area, there's a limit to what you can provide, but can you increase the diversity of biodiversity just by introducing these features to the landscape? So we looked at 2 different types of sand. One was a freshly dug Thanet sand, a very fine sand. The other was a recycled builder's sand. We put these across the landscape in several areas and then monitored the biodiversity that was able to use them. And we found very similar results. So the substrate addition benefited particularly nesting bees and wasps. There is a greatest abundance and richness on the Thanet sand, the fresh dug sand, but there are distinct groups of species associated with the different types of substrates and different species that you found in the grassland otherwise. Right, so that's the science, or some of it anyway. Without the practice and the management, there would be very little use to it though. So I'll hand over to John and he'll talk about that.
First of all, I guess thank you for inviting me here. It's a wonderful place, great hotel. So thanks very much for doing that. And I suppose I put down optimistic ranting because I'm always accused of you know, just banging on about stuff that keeps coming in my head, and I will be flitting around between subjects. You'll probably find that out straight away. So optimistic, right? I'd say this shopping trolley in a pond, this is an optimistic thing. Okay, so I would suggest that shopping trolleys in ponds increase biodiversity in ponds, don't decrease. Anyway, I'll talk about that later. But more importantly, and this is what Pat was saying, and I get the vibe from this whole thing. This is what it's all about. Most importantly, it's all about who the hell looks after stuff after we do it, and why aren't we investing in people that look after things? It's absolutely fundamental to completely everything we're talking about. It's because at the moment we only fund stuff at the front end. So ecologists, we're ecologists in general. They're generally surveying places that are going to be destroyed. That's where the money is. Yeah? We want ecologists embedded in the design. Exactly what Pat was saying is absolutely fundamental. So this picture here really sums up the system. So these 3 guys, they're probably really nice. I found them on the internet. I hope to God I don't meet them one day, but I'm sure there may be. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, they've invested more money, obviously, in the 3-handled stainless steel spade than they have in the tree, and they definitely haven't invested probably in anyone to water the tree. And that just about sums up our world. It's not even our horticultural world or our green infrastructure world. That's our world, isn't it? It's that kind of care. It's undervaluing people that look after places. And this is the ear protection is significant. We looked after a social housing estate in East London, in Hackney, for 18 years. One of the most wonderful things I've ever done. And we were handed the grounds maintenance contract. The grounds maintenance contract for social housing. Who's ever seen one? You have? Okay, good. Well, in 2002, when they handed it to us, the most depressing document you've ever seen. So it's just about how many times you cut the grass, how much weed cover there is, how much poison you can spray on the weeds. Nothing about the people that live there. Nothing about changing the space that people live there. And essentially, what we did, the only good things we did on the estate as a maintenance contractor were definitely not in our contract. So that was talking to people, pausing, hand weeding, flowers, color, food. All those things weren't in our contracts. And the reason we can do that is because we took these things off. So most of our contracts, especially on social housing, especially on the poorest places, you have to wear these to do it all. Ear protection, or you have to wear a combat suit to spray herbicide, you know, and that's basically the contract. I mean, it's better. Don't get me wrong, it's better, but it's at that time a point. But this affects everything, and I'd say if we can somehow, and I've been to quite a few conferences this year talking, and the money the amount of money that's talked about for infrastructure is just vast. It's just vast. We have so much money to build stuff. But if we took some of that money, and there was a scheme, what conference I was at, one of the Beth Chatlow conferences, and there was a garden being built there, 32 million pounds. I can't remember exactly what garden it was, 32 million pounds for a garden, one garden. And if you imagine if you gave me 1 million, I'm not greedy, 1 million out of the 32, I could probably embed 2 new gardens in every social housing estate in London for 10 years, probably. Now, isn't that the best use of that money? My God, instead of build all the time, it's absolutely fundamental to everything. So I tend to pause on this quite a bit, and I shouldn't do. And this would be, and then when we finished in 2020 on the estate, they asked us to write the grounds maintenance contract for the next contractors. This photo, this is probably my proudest moment, this photo, and this doesn't have a plant in it. It's not a landscape. It's Zainab, my favorite resident. I shouldn't have favorites, I know, but she was my favorite resident. We gave her some space to grow food. We ripped out one of those nasty little social housing rectangular rose beds, you know, those hybrid tea rose beds, sat there for 40 years with herbicide being sprayed underneath them, took that out, gave her a tiny space to grow food. She's just incredible food grower. She'd been in a flat for 20 years looking down at this pissy piece of rose bush that we were pushing mowers around for all those years, you know what I mean? And suddenly, when I was pushing my mower around it, you know, like I do, and I glanced down, there was a little tiny row of coriander just at the base of the roses. And I don't know why, but I sort of stopped and turned around, looked up, and she was at the balcony. And she couldn't speak much English, and I can't speak much Turkish, but she was just pointing at it as if to say, don't dare pull that out, you know what I mean? And that was the moment we just thought, this is bloody madness. You know, this space, these areas are for the people that live there. They're not for some old bloke like me pushing them up. So we took the roses out, we gave her a space to grow food, and that was our first food growing space on the estate. We ended up with 60 allotments in the end. But that, because she was allowed, bizarrely allowed, it's her space anyway, to go down there and grow food, she then felt comfortable to bake bread with her family on that estate. Now, there's a few issues of health and safety here, but don't look too closely, because the contract manager never found out about this, because she used to go around and collect wood from the estate to make her bread. Obviously, there's some quite large amounts of varnish going on there to be burned. Anyway, that is a joy. Don't you think that is a joy from a gardening and a maintenance? This is why gardeners are so important, because gardeners make this happen. They don't just garden. And if you could put more gardeners, more people into public space, oh my God, it would be a total game changer. Carefully stacked, and this is what I'm probably not going to get to. What I'm trying to say is taking those habitats, taking that waste, making it tight, making it beautiful. A dead hedge that takes a bit of time, and curves beautifully, looks really good. Standing, unfortunately, we didn't have enough trees that died at our place, sadly, and we killed it. But we never had enough dead, so we had to get dead stuff from somewhere else that would be in part of the management thing, and we brought it into our place and brought it into landscape. We dug a hole and planted dead trees. We planted dead trees, and then they become incredibly important. And the council don't have to worry about people moaning about them dying, which I think would be an advantage, because councils get hammered for trees that die, don't they? Plant a dead one. So here's our hero, probably mine and Stuart's hero. This is James McGill, an entomologist, absolutely worshipping. And look at him. He's in his favourite place, standing like he's a really tall guy. And he loves the fennel because then he can suck the insects off without bending over too much. It's a wonderful platform for all sorts of important things. Embed these people into design, exactly what I'm saying. Spend less. The trouble is, all the money is spent on finding out what's going to be destroyed. That's where the money in ecology tends to be. I'd say it's kind of important, but I'd say it's way more important to embed these people with the landscape architect to redesign the place the landscape is going to go back. Because if you design the landscape properly, it's going to go back. There's a good chance that might be better than the landscape that went before. And put community gardens in nature reserves. I mean, these things, look at that. I mean, look at that picture. That's a joy. It brings a total smile to your face. When I go in this place, it literally brings me to tears sometimes, because this is a community garden that's driven by volunteers that said to the Wildlife Trust, we want a community garden in this nature reserve. Right? And you've got 200 acres of hawthorn scrub. We're going to have a bit of your hawthorn scrub. We're going to make a garden. And that's what they did. And they embedded about 20 to 30 families, and they gave them spots, and they looked after this place. And because you've embedded 20 to 30 people's tastes in the garden, you created that complexity. And that's what gardens are so good at, because you've got all those different tastes going on. So you have that wonderful mix of native, non-native, bizarre, fairy things, all that going on. And that space is absolutely more biodiverse than the hawthorn scrub that's next to it. It is, because it's got tiny little ponds, it's got little raised beds, it's got ponds. It's just wonderfully complicated. So we've got to get away from that. That's not good. And architects, I showed that picture of the visitor centre. We've got to design these guys back in. Look at this. I mean, they were in every house when we were a kid. When I was a kid, probably older than this, but they were in every house because we had wooden fascias, we had holes in our house. We can design these things back into beautiful new buildings and put them in the place we want them. We can get them into the fabric, design some beautiful holes in the perfect place to put them back. Don't design them over the front door. Shit, like they used to when in my old house. Put them in the place you want. Design walls for ivy. Ivy, genius biodiversity command. Design a wall of a building, and we're working with architects to do this. Texture the wall perfect for ivy to grow up. Nothing for its cause trouble at the top. Grow ivy. You'll build it. No. Devote. Get stuff back in. It's way better. What's the best green wall? Ivy's the best green wall. So hang on, let's go out the two. So we've got one green wall where you have to bolt a load of infrastructure on the side of the building, put a load of plastic on it, fill it up with compost bob, we've got peat in it, grow a load of plants in the Netherlands, bring them over, stick them in your wall. Oh, and then you have to water them every single day. And then if you want to maintain it, you have to hire a cherry picker. Oh, that's sustainable. No, it's definitely not. Plant a pine on your wall. Design a beautiful stainless steel trellis. That's the one. Thank you. Love young people around me. Just finish like that. I've got somebody who works. I work with all the time. Benny, he's my young person. He finishes my sentence quite regularly, which is quite.
I'm going to tell you to finish your sentence quickly. And I'm probably the same age as you, but I wanted to give people a chance to actually ask them some questions.
This is a site for show. Worship bike owners, by the way. Pick the car owners.
Thank you, John. I am going to give people a chance. If I'm not Irish, we can do a quick poll. Is that better than having a minister come and talk to you? Yeah, cool. That's a good start. Has anybody got any questions they want to ask John or Stu? We have time. They haven't dumbfounded you, surely not. Any questions?
There's a lot of bullshit involved what I just said. So
There we go. Go on, Pat.
One for each of you. One is I really like your landscaping design, Stu, and I love the way it was designed to emulate the things that John was talking about. That was great. I thought it was fantastic. Did it get maintained? And if so, who by?
Short answer, yes, it did get maintained. And that was one of the challenges of the project, because we created something so new. We didn't know what level of maintenance it would need to maintain that level of biodiversity. It did get maintained, but it was on a part of the development site that was a temporary part of the site. The idea was that once we demonstrated proof of concept, the concept would then get rolled out more broadly across the rest of the site. It has to a certain extent, but there's been a real pressure between designing for aesthetics and what they perceive residents want. I think it comes back to something John said about talking to residents. When you're working on a site where there's no residents, and it's a completely new site, then it tends to be the developers that determine what the residents are going to want, and it's not necessarily what the residents want. So I think that the landscaping became a lot more formal and a lot less biodiverse as the development went on, but now it's kind of moving back. But yes, a short term it was managed, and it was managed by the maintenance team that were looking at the whole site, but the actual experiment did not persist because it was split into different parts.
Thanks very much for that. Second question was, John, and it's more of an observation than a question. Well, it's actually a question, really. We were talking about the front loading of cash and I suppose the biodiversity elements into things, and less money being spent on the monitoring over time, which I think is the case. But I wonder, is it a lack of money, or do you think it may be a lack of, could it be solved with regulation, do you think? Would that be a way that we could solve that problem?
I think everything can be solved with regulation, actually, because at the end of the day, you have to force people to do things. At least cycle shelters that we sell, developers buy these very reluctantly, right? Unbelievably reluctantly. They ring up and they say, "Unbelievable shelters. It costs more than the other ones. I can't have a deal with you because you're not my mate." It's just that you've got to force this stuff. But I think also, I'm really hoping there's going to be a mindset amongst big celebrity designers,